Good evening, everyone. It's now 7 o'clock. It's Tuesday, August 14th, 2018. We're in the CR room of the Community Center. It is the time, date, and place for the Carson City School District School Board meeting. And with that, we'll go to the first agenda item, and that is the flag salute. And just follow me or join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Agenda item 2, adoption of the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments from the public? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. On to agenda item number 3, the superintendent's report. Richard?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to report to the board that we finished this week training 63 new staff members. Want to give a shout out to Carrie Pryor. As always, she did a marvelous job, and it was fun to meet some of our new folks, and it looks like they'll be a good class, and we're very pleased and like to welcome them to town. I also like to just make mention for all of our parents who might be watching tonight that it's their responsibility to enroll their students in our student information system. And if they have questions about that, I invite them to contact my office. That's 283-2100, and we'll make sure that they have some support. As you know, school starts here for our students next Monday, August the 20th. Our veteran teachers will be returning tomorrow, and they'll be meeting with their principals and also with their staff members at their buildings. The first day for pre-K will be August the 27th, so just a week from next Monday. I also like to remind anyone who might be watching that free and reduced lunch applications, now's a good time to begin that work, and we'd like to encourage any of our families who may have questions about free and reduced lunch applications to also contact us or to get a hold of the operations department. And we still are looking for folks who might be interested in being put to work at our schools as playground duties or supervisors. And if anybody watching is interested in that, we encourage them to contact our Human Resources Department. With that, Mr. President, I'll leave it and turn it back to you.
Thank you. Let's go on to agenda item number 4, board reports, board member comments, starting with...
I had the pleasure today of attending Parent University at Carson High School. That was along with freshman orientation, so Parent University was for all the freshman parents. And Tasha Fuzan did a great job, her and her staff, especially Erin Bean, who was the MC and put it all together. She did a wonderful job. I felt welcome. I felt comfortable. I'm more excited than the kids.
For Carson Middle School, the 6th grade sneak peek will be tomorrow night from 4 to 6 p.m. in the gym, and the 7th and 8th grade sneak peek preview will be Thursday evening from 4 to 6 p.m. in the gym. And so you can go and get your schedule and locker information and meet some of the CMS staffs.
Joe.
Not much, but I just wanted to say that, as Don alluded to, they had freshman orientation, and seniors met earlier in the week as well to get their student body cards, and from what I heard from the students, and everything went pretty smooth. I think the school did a great job kind of getting everybody ready for school again, so I think the high school, hats off to the high school. And I wanted to reiterate what Richard said about Carrie Pryor and new hire orientation. It was fantastic. Carrie kind of motivated the whole room, and first time I really got to see her in action in that role, and good hire there. So anyway, good job.
Mike?
So I guess I'll start with, I'm wondering, did Carrie actually sing at her presentation, or was she like professional? because she's quite the singer also. So Fremont would like everybody to know that they're going to have an ice cream social and a meet and greet on Friday, August 17th from 4 to 6. And Dr. Ward would also like to invite all of us and the public to come see the newly painted mural depicting our theme of Find a Way.
Again, I'll thank Carrie for that, the new hire orientation. That was a fun day. And I'll let Carrie know, and as well as all of you here, my go-to song is The Impossible Dream from the Man from La Mancha, okay? So every day when I come here, that's what was my song. Okay, and then, but to Candy and Sue for the food preparation, I mean, that was something special, so thank you so very much on that. And with that, we'll end those reports. To agenda item number 5, the association reports. Mr. Wallace? Nope. Okay. Agenda item number 6, public comment. Any members of the public that wishes to come forward to talk about any agenda related to school activities that is not on the agenda, please come forward right now. Saying none, we'll go on to agenda item number 7, which is the informational update on the work-based learning program in the Carson City School District, and this is for discussion only. Yeti, and before you do that, I just want to acknowledge that Richard Varner, our school trustee-elect, is with us in the audience. So, okay, Yeti.
Can you hear me? Yes. Good evening. Let's get going with this. So I have a little presentation for you. Oh, yeah, for the record, Yeti DeLuca, Work-Based Learning Coordinator. All right, so this presentation is about the first 90 days on the job. It has been an exciting time. You know, I started at the end of the school year, so there's a lot to learn, and then I asked for homework during the summer, and I was quite busy with a lot of homework. One of the first things we did with work-based learning is that we launched a survey inquiring, asking the teachers, what do you consider work-based learning, and how can this be of service to you? And I wanted to share some of the responses. That the first one is the results of a question that is, what kind of work-based learning activities can we facilitate or help you support in your classroom or program? And the majority of the responses were for guest speakers. As you can see, there were a couple other things in there, but and then the other side of the slide shows you the schools that participated in the survey. We only received about, as you can tell, 87 responses. We received a little bit more, but we went through them and had a methodology to make sure that these were teachers that we could actually service rather than individuals just going through the survey and not providing the valuable data that we wanted on the other side. So we ended with 87. And the reason I show you this is because there's a lot of work to do and to think about how this is going to be launched in the classroom to facilitate the ease and the usability of something like this. This will all tie together as we move forward. I will move on to my next slide. This is hard to see. I apologize for that, but this ties to the strategic plan. And I invite all of you, as you do already attend, but just to make a point to attend the PLC, because we will be discussing this under goal number 5. And what we did is separated the strategic plan by the different sections of delivery, if you will. So one of the first section is going to be the community partnerships, is the first green section at the top. The next one is student services, so how does that translate into the classroom for the students? And then the work-based learning program that overlaps some of that. I apologize that it's hard to read. I don't know if we can focus in a little bit more, but it's rather detailed, but we do plan on going over each item at the next PLC. That's that, but that really helps out in focusing the program. The next thing that happened is the formalization of the work-based learning program per NRS 389.167, and that's on the next agenda item. But the state is calling up on the school districts across the state to apply to have a work-based learning program to formalize the entire process. We have had many of these opportunities already, particularly in our CTE courses, but now we're going district-wide, and they wanted that a little bit more. Part of what we did with the survey was also identify existing partnerships, because we have various partnerships throughout the district, but we don't have a database of that, if you will. Those partnerships are created and fostered by individual teachers or individual segments or schools, and that survey allowed us to gather more information on that as well. So that's part of the responsibility per that NRS as well. The next step would be to bring that all together and establish a system to track the experiences and streamline the delivery into the classroom. So what is it that we're going to offer, and how are we going to offer that, and what is that going to look like, and how many people are already ready to partner with us and engaged in that? So obviously, for the ultimate goal is to provide the students the timely opportunities to participate out in the community at various grade levels and such. And also to recognize those relationships. And for me is to recognize the partnerships, the students and the teachers on a timely and consistent basis, because so many people partner with us routinely, and they may not be as recognized as we would like them to be, to foster this program a little bit more. The next one is, one of the accomplishments of this summer has been the Career Center at the high school. We're not quite ready for the grand opening yet, but here are some of the pictures of the construction, if you will. That is the one of the labs next to the library. So we are leveraging the library resources, and we replace that lab, or move that lab across the center square, and built a wall for storage on the other side. But you can see the construction phases there, and then it was partially furnished by Greater Nevada. Greater Nevada donated the entire furniture of the first floor of the Eagle Station branch behind JCPenney's. They are closing that down, and they just said, walk it, take whatever you want. So we took it all, and we have a really nice student center furnished by them. And I just wanted to highlight that Mark Kornick's team was amazing at making this happen, from the construction management to picking up the furniture at Greater Nevada. You know, being a new employee and figuring out what my resources are, Greater Nevada leadership said, look, it's Wednesday, you can pick it up by Friday. And I thought, man, how am I going to get this? How am I going to make this happen? Well, with Mark. I called Mark, and he made it happen. Magic, was beautiful. And the custodial team at Carson High, they have worked so hard all summer. They've been my partners working out there all summer long, and they did an amazing job to the very last day. So I just wanted to give them credit for that, because all of this would not be possible without them. So that's a pretty quick presentation, because it'll go on to the next item for potential action on the board. But I don't know if you have any questions, comments.
Yeti, I'm just wondering, I noticed on the survey, it was really heavily, I guess, answered by high school, and then secondarily, middle school, looks like teachers. So is that a concern to you that you don't have very much feedback from elementary, or is that kind of a focus for the future?
It is a concern, but part of it was the timing, right? So I was hired April 30th. It was the end of the school year, testing, celebrations, and I realized there's a lot of internal education about work-based learning, you know, so making my rounds to the schools. My plan is to launch 2 surveys per year related to work-based learning. 1, to identify the needs, and 2, have we met the expectations? You know, so I think on a routine basis we'll gather more information, but I'm definitely, I think I met with the principals last week, and I think it clicked a little bit more, because I'm talking about my idea for the delivery in the classroom, and I had a couple of principals email me right away and say, okay, this makes more sense. I think there was a fear of additional work for the teacher in some of this, but what I want to deliver is an easy process where the guest speaker shows up and they have the curriculum ready to prep for that.
I just had a quick question. When is the next PLC meeting? Do we have a date yet?
We do. The first Community PLC is September 26th.
Great.
And that'll be starting at 6 o'clock at Carson High School in the library.
Thank you.
Additional comments, questions? Well, Yeti, let me just remind the board. We started this process in August of 2011. Now, just for tonight's meeting, I brought some of the notes of the community partnerships, the working group. And I've got the date on here. It's December 1st, 2011. We had a lot of different, or variety of people in that room. Manufacturers, Ray English, Scornclot, teachers, Michelle Lewis and others, and other business people that were in the room. And here's some of the notes. Why are we even doing this? Why have the community partnerships? I just thought I'd just read this into the record just so we can start having a continuing conversation for the next 40 years or so. The reason, and this came back from that initial meeting, and these are notes from the people in that room. The first one is to raise the level of achievement and success for all students by exposing them to something. We have the core curriculum, abstract learning, how is it applied? To add meaning and substance to the pre-K-12 curriculum by linking teachers, students, counselors, parents with the world outside the classroom. Show students how and why what they are studying is used and applied in the world beyond the classroom. Prepare students for successful engagement in the global knowledge economy. And that was where STEAM, and beyond. I've got another note here. And this came up during the course of the discussion, an understanding of what it means to compete and contribute in a culturally diverse and interconnected world. As I'm saying, these are coming from all kinds of different areas and different disciplines. Provide motivation and spark for students. And I know where this one came from. It was Ray English. He says, let me talk to the students. I can get them excited about school. Assist in job and career readiness skills. And again, there's a distinction between a job and a career. And we're going to provide that to the kids. Strengthen our workforce by encouraging innovative, creative, and critical thinking in our students. And again, you've often heard me say this. It's where combining academic achievement with the power of imagination. And these are coming from manufacturers that want, we can do a job, but there's more. And strengthen economic development within our community and region by providing a source of talented, highly qualified employees. All right, that's back December of 2011. Yeti, you're now on scene with the work base. But it was not only job shadowing and internships, and as we read the strategic plan, it is programs and activities, such as what Mike Jackson in that micro manipulator with the 5th grade. He combined with the core curriculum with a teacher, Gina Hoppy, and talking about and presenting a lesson, really, on decimals and the power of 10. These are 5th graders. This is work-based. We're not talking about careers, but we are talking about how what they're learning in the classroom is applied in the workplace. And with those 5th graders, I didn't believe what I was seeing. They were right on it. They wanted to go to work, that micro manipulator, and he explained you have to graduate and so. But that's a program and activity, and when the elementary teachers responded, this will be another thing that hopefully they're going to want. And this is going to be an educational process that, Eddie, you're in it for the long term. That more and more, because manufacturers are ready for this to come into the classroom to offer this kind of help, to the kids. Anyway, I just want to give some background, going back to 2011. So, Yeti, thank you for beginning and taking that major step forward. And I know that Candy back here, I know that Michelle and Todd and Dick Kale, got the database. You might want to check that database of the number of the actual database of the businesses and governmental entities and cultural organizations that are already, there's 200 or plus that are ready to be tapped. So anyway, okay, Yeti.
Thank you. And I've been working with Candy since Michelle Lewis's retirement. So Candy's the information base. And what I meant by the other comment is that we have so many other relationships outside of the CTE, that different schools and teachers individually have fostered, that I wanted to add that to our list. So I know that number is going to grow. We're just working on gathering the data and checking the accuracy of it, and we'll share that with you. So more to come on that.
Okay, any other comments, questions?
No.
We'll go on to agenda item number 2, which is discussion and possible action to approve the work-based learning program application for the Carson City School District with the Department of Education in accordance with NRS 389-167. And Yeti?
For the record, Yeti DeLuca. So just so I understand, you have the application? Okay, good. Thank you. So the tricky part about work-based learning in the application to the State Board of Education is that our school district thought about work-based learning during the strategic plan before the change to the law. So I just want you to know that work-based learning, as I understand it, is district-wide, all the way down to elementary school, all the way to 12th grade. The application is a little bit more geared towards secondary or high school students in that whole process. So I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, so I'm not quite sure how to present this in terms of, do we want to go page by page, or what would you rather me do on this?
Just give us the highlights of what this is going to be submitted or it has been submitted.
It needs your approval first, and then it will be submitted. It is due to the Office of Education September 7th. They are then taking all the districts up to the State Board of Education for final approval. Now, they've given us a guide in terms of how the district wants to go about this, and they have requested certain requirements. So one of the first requirements is what career cluster fields, trades, or occupations will you offer work-based learning. So that's why I gave you that foundation a little bit there. They want to know exactly what pathways we're going to offer work-based learning on, but because we are different and we are offering work-based learning across the district, I want to make sure that that is highlighted for them and meet their needs, but also be flexible enough for us to deliver that across the district. So what we are following is career and technical education, because that's what they know as the pathways, if you will. But I remind people as I talk to them about it, if an English class wants to participate in work-based learning, we're going to make that happen. But for now, we are going to focus on the career and technical education fields. So that's that first response. So that's what we're telling the district on that first section there, or I'm sorry, the Department of Education. We are doing the pathways and any other fields related to our district curriculum. Any questions on that? Does that make sense?
Can we add different career clusters at any time, or do we have to go back to the State Board of Education for approval if we were to develop another career cluster that would have this? I'm just thinking of the education CTE that we just started last year. If that became developed enough, would that be an option down the road?
Great question. So we asked, thanks to Renee, actually, she said, what is the frequency of approval for this particular application? So we reached out to the State Board of Education. It is not in the law. They didn't think about that. So they are formulating protocols for the state as a whole for that particular question. But that's why I added any other fields related to a district curriculum. In that particular case of education, or the EDU 110 course, that will be part of work-based learning. We're meeting, and we're going to formalize it as work-based learning experience, because they're ready for that. The second semester will be applicable to this. The next page shows the student qualifications for participation. Again, keeping in mind that our district wants to make this available to all students, and we want to be as flexible as we can with them to provide this opportunity that maybe could be the spark for somebody that may be struggling. So we wanted to keep this as open as we could. In that area there where the second sentence, it says student participating in clinical experiences, CTE work experience, that is per the state regulation that we will make sure we follow on those standards, not your typical or more traditional workplace tour or guest speaker or any of those things. They will be part of the workplace umbrella, but these forms will not apply to those things. Any questions on the student qualification for participation?
I just wonder about the first one, reliable and honest. Are they the same thing? Is it like, did the state give you these topics that you have to use? I'm just wondering, like, reliable is kind of, are you going to show up to work every day? Honest is, are you going to steal from the person? You know what I mean? It seems to me like two separate items.
What do you mean? On what section?
See where, if you go to your application, attachment B,
Okay.
as you're talking about, I'm just looking at your application.
Oh, sure.
And so it has personal qualities and people skills. And so the first one is reliable and honest. And in my mind, I kind of see them as two separate things. But, I don't think anybody's going to do an application and say I'm not honest, so.
Right. And they did not give some of the aspects of the application were directed by their standards, and that is not one of them. So we have the opportunity to amend that if we need to before it goes to the board. So let me know if you have any other ideas in that section.
Are you asking just for another box, like reliable as a check and then honest as a check, a separate box?
Yeah, I'm feeling like they're two different considerations, honestly.
That's fine. We can do that. Are we good with the student qualifications? Okay. And then the first attachment is the student application. So again, you can see the boxes at the top. So the application would be for those formalized experiences, the internship, the job shadow, career mentoring. The job shadow also is classified by the hours of experience. So if it's a short job shadowing, maybe more of a field trip, it may not require this. Are we good with the application? Attachment B, the student learning plans, we'll add that additional box. Anything else on that?
Let me just ask a question on this one, though. When you ask a student, we're trying to make this an opportunity for all. And we're asking the question, what is your career and technical program of study or elective course of focus? And I guess the students, would have one, or if they're in just an exploratory stage, where they go. They want to find out something about the design and development of a product, using engineering technology concepts but they're not committed to that career path. They would just like to explore it. Would that still apply here, or?
It would depend on the experience. We're going to be flexible as we can. But for example, the guidelines require an internship over 50 or 30 hours or more to have a learning plan. So in other words, if you're going to have a student out there, we have to develop some learning targets. That particular question that you're asking, it could be that they're maybe not in engineering, but they want to explore that. What kind of skill set do we want them to come out of that experience with? It may not be applicable to their focus of study, but they want to explore. So we would want to meet with them, the counselor and the teacher, and talk about what are the deliverables? What employability skills will you come out of from this experience?
Okay, in many cases, the students will be making out this application because they want credit for work-based experience. In other cases, there might be students that just want work-based experience without credit, and we wouldn't be going through this process.
Correct. So this particular learning plan may not apply to all, but it is something the school board or the State Board of Education wants to see what that would look like for Carson City.
Just a quick comment on the personal qualities, people skills, professional knowledge and skills. Some of the boxes have just the capitalization, so I'll just give you a copy of it to just make sure we're consistent with capitalization on those.
I appreciate that. Okay, next form is the student evaluation. Again, this is a form, these are based on the career and technical education employability skills. This is something that those students have to test at the end of their program. And we wanted to incorporate this across the board because they are very good skills to have as you graduate high school.
And those, these are great business expectations, so.
Yeah, I just had a question, on like the second, third page in where you said, we said see attachment A, see attachment B, C. On C here, it says vetting site host, but the form says program student evaluation. Will we be updating that third page in?
We should have that third page in because that's a key. Oh no, that attachment is not in there, right?
Well, I guess I like first, second, yeah, third page.
Okay, so the attachment D, the vetting the host site is attachment D.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so just updating.
We'll update
I was
that.
talking about this page, just updating this
Yes,
page
that-
to match the actual forms.
Thank you. And that brings us to the next form, if you're good with the other one, but let me know.
I had one. It's actually very slight. There's just a typo on C, attachment C, under oral and written communication. The first text there, communication, just had a typo. It's missing an O.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I still had my mic on, so I'll keep talking if I can. I didn't mean to keep it on. On that same section though, when we talk about punctuality, dress appropriately, I'll leave it up to you, but something, personal appearance, I notice, like, we interview people all the time for jobs, and some tend to come in pretty lax. So when I say personal appearance, everything from you combed your hair before the interview to maybe you put forth some effort to be well-groomed, that kind of thing. I don't know how we want to word that, but, I think that's important. I think some kids, they don't fully prepare themselves, and whether it's right or wrong, you set yourself up for some people kind of being turned away before they really had a chance to interview you. And so I think that personal appearance component, is an important piece.
Do you think, I'm wondering, as you're saying that, I'm wondering if you couldn't add that into demonstrates the use of professional language, manners, and,
Yeah,
professional appearance or whatever.
I think we can add it there.
Yeah, it kind of goes with that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Thank you, I will do that. And that goes along with the mirror we are going to have in the Career Center. Because we're going to have to look at ourselves before we go out there. Thank you.
Well, Yeti, like you said, in our strategic plan, we started before the Department of Education, so and I would call it not work-based, but applied learning is this wide, and theirs is this wide. But it doesn't matter. We're starting. And this application here, we're talking about the high school students at both Carson and Pioneer. And beyond that, we've got, like you said, you surveyed everyone. So, yeah, opportunities for all of our kids to go beyond. So, and again, I'm just going to thank you for starting this, taking this initiative to get this much done. And I know Candy has been working on this, and in this refresh of the strategic plan, she guided this section. It was really good. I remember her. We're going to get a systemized community partnership program. And I go, wow, that's good. We're going to get a plan. So who is involved now? Is it just you and Candy, or where are we going from here? I mean, you can't do all this by yourself, I don't think, but maybe you can.
Well, you can see the typos. I really can't. Well, I think the CTE team and I, and we are building a new team, if you will, and we're building the collaboration not just with CTE, but also the guidance counselors and the library. And, this umbrella really takes a whole lot of other entities under, if you will. And when I say under, I don't mean directing them, but collaborating with them. For example, today I met with Mr. Macy for senior projects and how that ties to work-based learning. So those opportunities. So it takes a village to make this happen, and we sat in a room, Ms. Kima, Principal Fuson, Amy, Vice Principal of Price Middle, and Candy, Ms. Ruff, and we went through these applications and really brainstorm. So it's a team effort. I'm sitting in the Career Center, but I really want to leverage all of those resources around me to be able to deliver this program across the district.
So, I guess one of the questions I have that is kind of common sense, but for some of these kids, like we have terms on here like effective speaking. A minute ago, we talked about professional appearance. And so in preparation for this process, what supports do we have for some of these students who might think it's okay to go in a t-shirt and, sweatpants to an interview, or, you know what I mean? I'm just thinking some kids are going to need additional support, whereas a great number of our students just kind of know these things through their parents. But not everybody has that.
If we talk about Carson High School, that's really my comfort zone right now. 75% or about 75% of our students are in CTE. And some of this, all of this material comes from the CTE employability skills. So most of those kids are ready or prepared. So at least they've heard of the terms. They are going to be testing to this, so they know. My idea would be that the Resource Center, the Career Center, actually puts on a boot camp or a seminar before we take these kids out to prepare them. That's why we have a mirror. We're going to have a projector, and we're going to talk about what that looks like. And it's a big. We're going to start small, obviously, but another example is the leadership classes at Carson Middle School. That's a whole big group. They want guest speakers to come in and talk about what does it look like to be professional? What does that look like? So we're setting the foundation there. By the time those kids come into the high school, they'll know those expectations. But the clearinghouse for that would be the Career Center. So then and part of the work-based learning approach is to catch that and prepare those students for those expectations going forward, and then having the learning plan as well and the expectations from both the employer or the host site and the student. This is what's expected, and this is what that looks like. So there's going to be a lot of group setting or one-on-one mentoring in that way.
And I think that reinforcement is, like I said before, I think it's important. And I think a lot of these kids are getting that experience already at the middle school level. I've sat in for years on the mock interviews. And every year I see an improvement there. The kids come more prepared. They come better dressed. They ask better questions. And so they're getting that training, which is nice to see. But certainly at the high school level where the stakes start getting a little higher, reaffirming that is critical for these kids. So I'm glad everything from the mirror to the preparation and mentoring is all important. So I'm glad to hear that's starting to happen.
Thank you. Any questions on any of the forms, suggestions, spelling errors?
I think it's a good start. let's jump out here and start having the kids benefit from the expertise that's in the community that wants to be shared. You know, from technology to global operations, and we can start tying it in, and Richard and I talked about this with our learning guides, and you know, all that's going to tie together for the kids. They're going to have tools they can take with them, you know, into life, that they can address any opportunity and obstacle. They'll have something, a place to start. And this foundation is absolutely is critical. Not only in the high school students in internships and job shadowing, but just the experience beyond the classroom itself. So, okay. Ryan.
I think you do a great job. I think doing anything from scratch and then having to do this and then sit in front of this group and have your stuff essentially proofread, it's not easy. So I think it's fantastic. So just keep working hard. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, and I'm a year-round employee, so I was working somewhat alone in the summer, so I appreciate your feedback on that. Thank you. Until they came back and helped me out, so thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, comments, again, Yeti, keep it up. We'll be talking to you often. Pardon? Oh, it is, and that's right.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees, in accordance with NRS 389.167, approve the Carson City School District Work-Based Learning Program application with the Nevada Department of Education as submitted with the corrections discussed tonight.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments from the audience, the public? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, agenda item number 9, informational update on the capital projects in the Carson City School District. Mark?
President Skorzek, trustees, executive staff, thank you for having me tonight. I have a presentation and it's coming up here. This is a capital improvement presentation on projects we got done this summer. It's really not our full feature presentation that I'd usually do the first quarter in September with all the pictures and everything that's going on. This is more of a comfort level for you guys with the work we did, and that school is going to open on time and in good shape. So it's about 9 slides long, and we can begin. Good timing, guys. All right, so the projects I'm showing you here now are, these are capital funded projects, okay? We had a parking lot improvement project at Carson High School, along with transportation, had some work out in their yard as well. And we are in the process of another phase of that for a connector between the two. So we're looking at getting that done. But this project also was, the work was done by Ryder Homes, who was instructed to work with us regarding getting our buses off the street and providing a new bus lane. So they actually designed that with our help and had the work done at no cost to us. So the bus lane itself. So now the buses will come from the bus yard through 2 gates and come alongside the school and be lined up there, all 10 or 11 of them, and they'll load there and then they'll take off for their routes. So they won't be in the street any longer. Until we start doing this little extended project, we may have them out in the street at that time while we're finishing that, but that'll be within a couple months. We should have it all completed. And then we also had a Carson High School locker room and shower room improvements done on some really old fixtures and ADA improvements in those areas for both the girls varsity and the boys varsity locker rooms. So it was quite challenging to have those two projects going at the same time and have the parking lot closed and open for 4th of July and closed again, and with all these folks coming in, but it worked, and the school worked with us really well. We are just completing the new public address system for inside the school. The new PA system is being upgraded. Our elevator modernization project at Eagle Valley and Carson High School will actually, there's been a lot of prep with that. There's a lot of lead time for that material. That will start on September 4th and will be done right around the end of the year in November, December. And so we'll have 3 older elevators modernized and up to code. Borderwick Kinder Playground, we did some improvements there. There's a hill out in front at the end of that playground that rolls toward Thompson Street, and the kids would roll down this hill and hit this fence. So we raised up that area. Thank you to Mr. Cassiopo's firm for helping with that as well. And it'll be a nicer area for the kids, safer as well. And raise that fence to the top of that wall that's out there. Fritz C building wall replacement. The C building wall, exterior wall, is being replaced. We found some things in that wall that wasn't good, and so we abated that, and we've torn off 2 feet up of the sheetrock and the stucco, exposed everything, sanitized everything, and we will be building a curb to place that wall on. There wasn't a curb put there properly to begin with, so water got underneath and then got sucked up into the sheetrock and such. So we'll have that done in a couple weeks. And then the Operations Center storage room, also there was an old half a portable that was stuck on the side of that building, and that's just about seen its days, so that has to come down, and we'll be replacing that storage area. That'll be a fall project. We really wanted to get all the school projects done first. Moving on from away from capital funded items, we did over 70 additional small projects this summer, ranging anywhere from replacing carpet in a classroom to much larger projects like replacing the backstop at Carson High School varsity field, painting, electrical and HVAC upgrades and improvements. We had other wall replacements. We had another wall in Fritch that was 3/4 of a wall that split a room, and it was kind of noisy in there, so we replaced that wall, put new data in. And we had several of those around the district. A lot of concrete, parking lot maintenance projects. Of course, all our gym floors got done around the 4th of July. That took a little longer than usual because now everybody wants graphics in their gym floors. So the guys that are refinishing are taking a little bit longer to put these graphics in the floors, similar to our varsity floor. Carson High School Career Center, I think we're just about done with that. And some other environmental abatements that we had around the district this summer that we completed. Quick update now on capital projects, but these are bond-funded capital improvements. Fritch Elementary School is substantially complete. We we have 2 classrooms, 2 offices, 2 building connections there, storeroom, ADA lift, and the hallways, exterior hallways were heated. We actually have a couple pieces of casework that we still need to get in, but everything will be complete by the first day of school. Carson Middle School STEM Lab, we had our final project meeting today with the contractors. It's substantially complete, but we will be working next week on completing it. A couple items have to be completed. They can't be done in the when students are in the classrooms, Mr. Satter's got a game plan, and we saw this coming a couple weeks ago. But we did complete 2 classrooms, teacher collaboration area. There's going to be an outdoor work area, concrete area where they can do experiments outside, and a television studio for their news that they do every morning. Seeliger, this is phase 1 of the bond project. If you recall, we put some money aside to in conjunction with the Fremont project. So students will be moving, the CLS students, the career life skills students will be moving to Fremont when we complete that project from Seeliger. So we'll take those rooms that they were in and make them into better classrooms for standard students. So we began that with taking temporary walls that were in the kindergartens. This was built in the 70s. So that was kind of the style then. You'd open up these walls and have this massive room. We teach differently today, and it's kind of noisy. So we did, I think, 4 classrooms, hard-walled them, put new data in, hung new boards up, and then did some floor replacements in the older ones as well, tile, carpeting. Let's see, and we increased the size and secured the kinder playground. We brought that all the way to the building, made it larger, put some Foursquare and those kind of things on the concrete, and actually new asphalt in there. So nice area. This is just our elevations of Pioneer. We are into phase 2 of that project now. These are renditions of what the building will look like. On June 22nd, we had the groundbreaking of that project, and I would really say it was more of a modular smashing than a groundbreaking. And Board President Swarzik did a wonderful job there. He rocked it. He rocked the building. You rocked the ground. I think you rocked yourself a little bit inside there too, but that was a fun day. And the portables went away that day. They started that day going away, and we had 2 of them that were built in place, and they were could not be moved. We had 2 other ones that someone actually wanted, so we were able to sell those and probably save about $15,000 in the process on the project. We had site rough grading is complete. And today I noticed there were 3 tiers of CMU blocks going up. So we'll soon be to a level where we can start getting inside on the ground on that. The lower parking lot that's down on John Street and Stewart, that will be complete around October 1st. And the project itself should be complete around Valentine's Day 2019. I think our architect committed to that day.
Yes. And I drive by there just about every week, and I'm going,
Moving along.
February 14th, huh?
Yeah.
So,
it'll start going up quick. You'll see. All right. Update on Mark Twain and Fremont. This has been a challenging project, especially budget-wise. We've received their 100% schematic drawings, which is about 30% of the design is complete. In the conceptual estimate about a month ago, it was quite high, more than we thought it would be and way more than budget. So we somewhat challenged United Construction to come up with a better plan for us. And they did that through their general conditions. They found a way that they could share administrative costs between the 2 projects rather than have 2 superintendents on each project, have 1 superintendent on each project, and 1 that they could share for administration. So the administrative costs came down quite a bit. And then we also did reduce some of the scope of the project. We will have a bond advisory meeting on September 20th. And so we'll update you with more of the drawings, and you'll get to see some more of the particulars at that meeting. And I suppose I'll be coming here about a week later doing the same thing for this audience here and the public. So that'll come to light a little better soon. Final design drawings are due the 1st of October on this, and we should start construction in November. I actually think we can start that a little bit sooner, depending on negotiations for the maximum price. Construction will be finished before school starts next year. Any questions on that? Okay.
Mr. Cornick, could
Yes,
you
sir.
just give a brief update about like the habitat at Fremont and what's going on there?
Sure. In this summer, we did contact some of the partners, and some of the partners from the Habitat contacted us. We talked with them about the need to bring down some of the habitat in the other areas. There was damage being done to the building because the soil was so high. And we talked to them. They came in, dismantled the wiki up, took that somewhere and put it back up. I think it's in Incline Village now. And we identified a couple key plants, trees, if you will. There's a bristlecone that was in there, and there were two other dedication trees to employees and students. So we were able to keep one of those in place and move the other two. And the bristlecone will be a centerpiece in one of our outdoor education areas once we build that area. Okay, and Bordewick Bray tenant improvements. We are currently in progress, and we'll be done with one of the HVAC projects at the end of this week, and we'll continue into the new wing, into the music room, and into a couple rooms in that island to try to increase better air quality in there. There's not as much velocity required at the time we put these in that we need now. And so it's been identified by us and by teachers in that area that I went and met and talked with, and we came up with a solution for that. So we'll move forward, keep moving forward on that. We're going to do a test and then see if the test works, then we'll do that to the rest of the rooms in that wing. We did an office remodel. There was a large office that we made into two smaller offices to make space for staff. And we're continuing to discuss what we're going to do on space requirements for that building. We have no set plans. We have a couple concepts, but at this point, they will not be using the portable for students this year, but they will use it for storage. And it's the portable's actually in not real good shape. So we would like to move forward to getting that off campus, but right now they're going to just use it for storage. The district office remodel, we do have a redesign that we've shown, and with a scope reduction on that to where we would basically keep the boardroom that we have, remodel and refresh that, and then build on a similar size building behind Mr. Stokes' office that would house improved offices. We have several offices out in that building where you have to walk through an office to get to another one. So we're going to improve that area, and would like to bring the grants department up there as well. So that is moving forward, President Swarzik.
Of your presentation, the only substantial increase in classroom space is Mark Twain and Fremont. I mean, there's other classroom space being provided.
Right. Substantial? No. I mean, there isn't. Mark Twain, Fremont, Seeliger will get a couple classrooms that'll be added for general use. Carson Middle School is getting quite a bit of added space, 2 large STEM rooms, which will help with growth, and then we have a plan for the rest of that building to do some work. But that's about it at this point, yep.
Okay. Well, I bring that up because earlier today, there was a meeting, the Debt Management Commission of the city, and AJ made an excellent presentation, but there are questions that came up with going forward from John Barrett, one of the city supervisors, and it had to do with the increased number of students, and AJ was trying to say, well, last year we had 70 and we're projecting even more. And the question was, even going forward, and even John Barrett was saying, well, we're probably going to have more than that. And we are. If we took just, Ronnie Hanneman from the chamber put out that statistic that 55% of our employed workforce in the city resides outside of Carson City. And a lot of those moved at the time when the housing prices went up and a lack of housing in Carson. And those people might be coming back. That's one thing. They're coming back for a reason. Because of all the good things that we're hearing about what's going on in the schools, what Yeti's doing, what Jennifer Ward, what Ruth Lee's doing. It's just happening. And through our public information officer, this is getting out not only to our surrounding communities, but also California and others. That's for the new people coming in. They're going to want to come right here. They can, if there's housing available, which it appears there's going to be. So I know that, we've got our group that gets together, but it's probably going to be sooner than later when we're going to be faced with some pretty dramatic changes. And I guess my question, are you ready for that?
Tough question. I did forget Pioneer. We are adding 10,000 square feet there, so there is some space there. But it is a good question for a conversation to have next month at that meeting, to talk about that and see what we might be able to do. We tried to, in almost every project, add some kind of space in our buildings and at least stay ahead of what's happening. A lot of the projects within the city that I talked to Hope Sullivan this morning in planning department about some of them, and they're beginning their process, but they're a little ways off. So it could be that we stay in front of that wave for a bit until we get that funding to add another school on, or K-8 project, or an elementary school, or even a combination of remodeling another school into from an elementary to a middle, and then adding an elementary school. There could be that opportunity. So am I ready right now I'm not ready for 500 more students, no. But
So, Mr. Stokes, did the issue with Carson Montessori ever get sorted out? Because I think that's kind of a looming thing, and in addition to Silver State Charter, didn't they close down this year? And so we have pockets of students that might be coming sooner rather than later, just that are here right now.
right.
So, Mr. Walker, members of the board, if I could add to that just a little bit, I have not been able to get back in touch with Mrs. Daniels yet. I anticipate that will happen very soon. The other part to this is our ability to bond for enough money to build a school outright. We can't do that without going back out to the community and asking them to raise property taxes for themselves to build a school. And so we probably need to have that conversation soon to see what the desires of this body is. I know that there's talk, and they've been considering the whole condition of whether or not there is affordable housing in our community, and that has been a problem. That's why those 55% of people who are working here are trying to live elsewhere, is because there's not that affordable housing here. So once that does get solved, then people will come in larger numbers. We're anxious to see what happens with this year's enrollment. That will be a key factor, I think, as we begin having our conversations. But if in 2021 we're able to go back out and sell another school bond, we're still only looking at about $20 million, which in the old days would have been a tremendous amount for us, but with current conditions, that's not enough to build a school outright, and we'll have to phase that in if we're looking at trying to keep the tax rate at what it currently is. So this is kind of an exciting time, but it's not something that we've had to do in recent times because we haven't had that experienced growth.
Okay, Mark, anything else you would like to leave us with?
Well, I'd just like to add on to what Mr. Stokes was saying. I think we have to look at other opportunities to raise revenue as well, whether it's legislatively or it's public-private partnerships. We've looked at some of those options. So, I mean, at this point, I think everything's on the table.
Well, AJ gave a very sobering presentation today, and the realities of what it costs to build a school. Like just our remodel of Mark Twain is what we built the entire school for. And those kind of things were a very awakening to a lot of the Debt Management Commission. So.
Just a question. With the Mark Twain and Fremont expansions, how many classrooms are we looking at adding onto those sites?
Well, it's kind of hard to say how many classrooms because there are some full-size classrooms, there's some smaller collaboration classrooms, but we will have capacity to basically max those schools out at 650 students.
Mrs. Crossman, I can just say too, so for Mark Twain, it's a little different because there's the 4 portables that are there. It works out that they effectively add 1 classroom and a couple small like tutoring rooms and things like that if all the portables go away. So that's kind of a question, and we're probably going to be keeping 1 portable, at least at this point, for storage, and if the need would come up for another classroom. Fremont, however, is whatever is added is new space, and I think that is 6 new classrooms. It's 5 or 6 new classrooms, and then some smaller rooms there. I'd have to look back, but that's really if any site you really see kind of the most new classrooms, Fremont's the school. And that doesn't include the new special education pod wing that they're going to have there as well, because they'll be taking the CLS program from Seeliger. So there's going to be 2 or 3 classrooms, kind of smaller classrooms there.
And if I remember correctly, we have these conversations every few years about how big we want our schools to be. So, I mean, we can keep adding classrooms, but at some point the principals are going to go, hey, we got too many kids here. I recall the number being like 580 students at an elementary school kind of thing. I don't know if I remember that correctly, and now we're talking 650. So we're maxing out these sites.
Is it wise to get rid of the portables until we kind of figure this out? I mean, when you get rid of them, it's gone, right? It's not like sitting somewhere waiting for use again, right?
Yes and no. There are some portables that shouldn't, if you move them, they're not going to be able to set them up again. We have some that we could move, but we're going to have to find a place to store them. We can't, at Mark Twain, we could keep 1 in place. We can't keep the other 3 in place. They're in the way of the construction or the fire lane that needs to be there. So it's a good possibility we could move those 3. They're in pretty good shape for 20-year-old portables. So I think we probably would be looking at doing that. I think if you hooked up a trailer to the one at Bordewick, it would fall apart before you got out of the driveway, as we had to weld a tongue onto that to move it over there from Seeliger a few years ago. So we've evaluated that, and I provided Mr. Fueling with a list of what portables we have and the condition they're in, the age, etc. So those are options.
I would just add to Mr. Walker, so something that the district has done over time is keep track of the portables and what condition they've been in. So I've seen over time what those changes have been, and the most recent one was done just, I think, in the last year of those portables, or a year and a half, when construction kind of started ramping up. And I think of the 10 that were listed, I want to say 6 or 7 of them were considered poor. I mean, poor to very poor condition. I think there was only 2 maybe that were still considered fair or good. So maybe those are some of the ones at Mark Twain. So it's, unfortunately, a lot of them I think have just seen better days, but we'll certainly work to get the most out of them that we can.
Just another thought, which I hate to say the word, but are we looking at possibly rezoning when it comes to that? And are we keeping track of, because I think I remember you saying there was some software that we had that we could track where student growth, what areas they're moving into when they come in?
Right. So I just completed a week-long training on that software. We'll be doing a count, taking our kind of locational data for students on October 1st and plugging that in, and then we'll have 4 years of history, so we can see the trends over time. You can plug in where the current or the known tracks of development will be, the types of housing, and it actually shows you over time, if you didn't change the zones, what would you expect to happen to those schools based on how kids would occur in those areas. And then you can look at, if you did rezone, what would the impact be, now, say 5 years from now, estimated, projected. So it at least gives you a reasonable chance to make a decent decision on rezoning for impact in the future. So we're just about there. Once the kids come back, we should be ready soon thereafter.
Additional comments, questions? Mark? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, one thing Mark didn't say is the amount of work they've done with their operations staff, honestly, is impressive. I mean, they internally, Mark Johnson isn't here tonight, but between Mark Kornick and Mark Johnson, the staff they have, they've done tremendous work, and you're down some staff internally. And so they're keeping all these balls in the air and getting a tremendous amount of work done with really an ever-increasing staff. So honestly, job well done.
Thank you, Mr. Cassiopo. We're actually almost up to full staff. It's been 2 years since we've been there, and we have incredible new young bunch of folks there that are really hard workers, and they're all cross-trained in different jobs, and they can all do different jobs. So we're really excited about the future with the new staff, and I know this ended as a tough conversation to have, but as usual, I want to end this on an upbeat note and tell you about Energy Star. So we have applied for Energy Star in 10 of our buildings. We've received 4 Energy Star certifications already, and we will receive most likely 5 by the end of the month. So that's 90% of our schools that will be Energy Star rated. And I'm not sure anybody else has 90% of their schools rated. So we're really excited and proud of that fact.
Well, and if I could add, if I understand it, Clark County has over 300 schools, and they don't have 9 schools that are Energy Star rated, I believe. So that says a lot for what Mark's done.
So we're going to have 9 of how many schools? We have, 10?
Yeah, 90%.
So it'd be, Pioneer?
Yes, sir. But we'll try for them next year. When they got rid of the portables, we'll get a new building. We'll try next year.
And plus, you just pass all this along to our students. And I'll just make a little comment on that governor's mention at the end of the school year with the energy-saving projects at both Carson Middle and Eagle Valley. I mean, that's major league things that you've accomplished in addition to providing space for our kids. You've got them thinking. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item number 10, informational update on Safe Voice, statewide 24-hour tip-taking and response system focused on school safety and student well-being. This is for discussion only. Ann?
There we go. Thank you. For the record, Ann Sear, and I've been asked to give you a brief informational update on Safe Voice. Just by a show of hand, how many of you are familiar with what Safe Voice is or have heard of this program? Wonderful. So I won't be giving you the full education this evening. Just a brief overview of the implementation of the program and where we're at in coordinating the program at our school district. This presentation that I'm sharing with you this evening was prepared by the Nevada Department of Education and the Nevada Department of Public Safety, so it's not my work, but I'm using it just to facilitate the presentation. So Safe Voice is a new live 24/7, 365-day-a-year tip reporting system for school safety, student well-being. It's an anonymous tip reporting system. And just for your own information, when we had a hazard and vulnerability assessment conducted 2 years ago by Mr. Kay of School Safety Operations, one of the recommendations that he made out of that assessment was to look into implementing some type of anonymous tip reporting system for students to report school safety concerns. We did not do anything with that recommendation immediately because we were aware at the time that the State Department of Ed was applying for this grant and looking at developing this program, which was largely based on the Colorado model, which is called Safe to Tell. So the approach to the tip reporting system, you have your theory of change, a safe school, plus student care, empowering students to report equals a positive school climate and student success. Safe Voice is another door in the no wrong door approach to school safety and student wellness. When students go through the door or make a report a tip, there is a system of supports waiting for them. It is now a requirement for all public schools in the state of Nevada. This program was funded by a grant and was coordinated by the Department of Education, but is actively managed by the Department of Public Safety. Many students face emotional and mental health challenges, and our schools are equipped with school social workers and counselors who are an integral part of this program in providing those resources that are on the other side of the door when those tips are reported. It's an early warning system meant for the prevention, intervention, and support for the whole school community. So this diagram just kind of gives you an idea of Safe Voice and how that fits in with law enforcement, behavioral health, and the school community all working together. You have the Department of Education, school social workers and counselors, behavioral agencies, law enforcement agencies, Department of Public Safety, and locally the Carson City Sheriff's Department. There's outreach and awareness that's being led by the Department of Ed along with the school districts. Tip processing is law enforcement led, so the tips come into the Department of Public Safety. They have the station that is manned 24/7, and those tips are then evaluated, and based on the nature of the tip, it is sent to the Carson City Sheriff's Office for immediate response, or if it's a school-based behavioral issue, it goes to the school team. The school team is notified of the law enforcement related tips as well, but the response in the investigation into those tips is immediate and handled through the Sheriff's Department. So we have several community partners. Along with the Sheriff's Department, you have the mobile outreach and response team within the Sheriff's Department that can go out and respond to behavioral issues when our local behavioral agencies are closed down for the day. That that response is still in place 24 hours a day. So again, the process, the tip comes into the Department of Public Safety. They receive the reports. They then begin a dialogue with the person who reported the tip. They'll ask the person if they wish to remain anonymous. They'll ask them if there are other witnesses to what has been reported. They will ask them for names, dates, times, locations. All that information gathering takes place, and then that information, if there is an active threat of school violence or suicide, immediately goes to law enforcement 24 hours a day. If there is an active suicide tip being received, that goes immediately to the crisis call hotline while law enforcement is dispatched. The school team receives the report and responds timely during school hours. Okay, so the composition of your school teams, you have your school resource officer who responds to school violence, drugs, and other illegal activity, administrators at the school team providing leadership, responding to bullying, discipline, and communicating with parents. The counselors at the schools are providing a connection with the students, screening, assessing, and referring as necessary academic, behavioral, and social supports. And then our social workers are again connecting with the students, screening, assessing, and referring as necessary, and also connecting to school and community resources, and a warm handoff to those community resources where those referrals need to be made. So this is just a screenshot of what that looks like within the backdoor, the database. When those tips come on, you'll see over on the left there the nature of the tip, the name of the school, the narrative, the tip that came in, a description of the concern, the name of the person involved, and then at the bottom of the screen there is a list of tips that are active or open or closed for that particular school district. The tabs up at the top, if you see a little red dot on the tab, that means that there's active content being contributed to that portion of the tip system. So in this particular case, there's a dialogue occurring. Attachments might include pictures or videos or screenshots. And then the disposition screen shows the ultimate disposition of the tip, what action was taken, what referrals might have been made, and whether or not it remains open for monitoring or if it's been closed. Again, the system encrypts reports, so the reporter is anonymous. Their phone number, their IP address, their location are not known. They may, however, choose to share that information and contact information to assist. There are 3 ways to make a report. You may download the Safe Voice mobile application, call the toll-free hotline, or go to the website at safevoicenv.org and report the tip directly through the website. There is currently a public information campaign afoot to support the rollout of this new program. We have received posters, banners, information cards to be displayed at all of our schools. There was a press release made this morning. Department of Education made a press release this week. And this is a video. Renee's clearing it up. There we go. we go. There are other public information campaigns. You'll see these on TV, billboards, radio announcements. So there's quite a bit of public awareness being campaigned around the program to launch that. So I think these are examples of the posters and the rack cards, the hallway posters that are being displayed in the classrooms. These were all provided to us by the Department of Ed. And that is all of the information that I have to share with you on that. Are there any questions for me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, the Safe Voice program, and it's beyond the schools, but related to the schools. But let's talk about the schools and people that will most need this, or students that may be in trouble, or other students knowing some students in trouble. What have we done with our peer-to-peer connection? To have posters up is one thing. To be able to talk directly to the students, or have another student talk to the students, the more likely they are to use this app or some other means. What, have we done anything to, to move this along?
There is a launch kit that was provided to us by the Department of Ed just last week that contains quite a bit of information that teachers can use to talk about the program in classrooms to encourage students to use it. Our SRO is also in the schools talking with students about how to use the program and how he's connected to that.
Okay, so we got 2,400 students in the high school, and we've got probably a like amount in the two middle schools. Or maybe a little over 2,500 with Pioneer. Is it just hit and miss that we talk to the students, or do we have it organized to say, yes, it's available, but we're going to talk directly to the students? When I say we, but have another student talk directly to the students, that's 5,000 students without the elementary schools.
Right.
Are we doing that, or is it just left up to chance? And I'm not saying that in a facetious way. I'm saying it because it's serious. On the well-being of our students.
So this was discussed at our first principals meeting of the year, and I gathered from that meeting that each principal had plans to introduce the material to the schools, perhaps through leadership groups to encourage students to discuss it with one another. I can also tell you that this program was rolled out in 2 cohorts, and that Washoe County was in the first cohort. Many of our students already know about this program and were using it before it was formally launched because they have friends that live in Reno that made them familiar with it. So it's pretty well known already.
How do we monitor this to make sure that our students do know about it? Not leave it to chance, but to let them know the seriousness of this and to actually use it. Do we have a tracking system? Do we know that we've gotten to kids? Is there a specific class or classes that they are given this information to be used? How do we do this?
Well, I would imagine the most effective way to measure that would be to survey the students after a brief period of time to ask them if they were aware of Safe Voice and if they were using it.
And I think it's important. And I go back to this NASB safety conference that we all went to. And I talked to the person who headed up a lot of this in Carson County. And they use a lot of what they call their student ambassador program to get information for kids who need help or who may be going in a direction. And it's not a perfect world. We're not going to get to everyone, but something has got to be done more than just, hello, here it is. Because when it's needed, and it's needed pretty quickly. So.
Right. So I know that we are We are putting the information on the school websites. There is a press release that was done this week. There is a letter that has gone out to parents. There's the information that's presented in the classrooms. There's information that's on billboards, radios, and television, and our SROs are speaking to students in the classrooms. So that is the information I have in terms of what we are doing to promote this.
Okay, and in your office as risk manager, are you the one responsible for monitoring to see that it is done? Or who's responsible for making sure that this happens?
I believe that the program is being measured by the Department of Education. Yeah, I am the program coordinator for the school district, so I've received the materials from the Department of Education, pushed them out to the school sites, and made sure that the materials were delivered and that it's being implemented. But I have not received any information from the Department of Education in terms of what they would expect us to do to measure the use of the program, or if that's something that they plan to do.
And perhaps it's the Department of Public Safety who's wasn't that another department?
Yeah, they
working
really
with it as
lead
well?
response, but the grant funding is being managed through the Department of Ed, so they would be doing any sort of grant reporting, and I would imagine they would be collecting that data for their grant report.
Just a question that I have, because it seems like, I mean, the phone number's really long, which I think is unfortunate, but it seems like they're marketing it more to the app use, which
Yes,
seems for
very
secondary
much so.
students, that would be what they would use more. And I'm wondering if there's a way we can, when we issue Chromebooks, if we can't have like an icon with that already installed on their Chromebooks, so it's something on the menu list. I don't know if I'm just making this up or if you can actually do that, but it seems like that would be maybe something, if it's already there, they can, it's right on their Chromebooks.
So on our district badges, Susan Kimo for the record, so on the district badges, Safe Voice is on the back of our new badges. And then on the students, when they get their picture taken, when they get an ID, it will also, the number will also be on the student's school ID.
Yeah.
Each school also has social emotional learning efforts that they are working on in their individual schools, and our social workers will also be a part of getting the information out.
I was just going to say, and I think it seems to me two different issues. So I think you're talking about the outreach and how we get the word out to all of the students, and I think that Anna's kind of talking about the response when there's a report. And so the principal or the administration gets those reports and act on them, and so that's one piece of accountability. But then I think that it's just kind of how it's getting out there. You have the posters, you have the name badges, and it's just kind of hoping it sticks.
Okay, with this, now Richard and I were talking here at our weekly get-together before this, that maybe it's time to put all this together to find out where we are. We adopted a suicide prevention and intervention policy and the protocols or regulations. We got the safe health professionals that also overlap in this, in the social emotional learning. And now we have this, that maybe it's time that we have a presentation before this board of how this thing is put together, starting with, we adopted a policy, where have we been, where are we going, and what are we actively doing to get to the students? Both the social workers in that policy, the suicide policy and intervention, and this. How are we bringing it together to get to the students to say there's a safe place? And that's, just for their health. So maybe, Richard, could we do this in here, maybe, within a month, maybe have this thing, we're starting school, it's the ideal time, get this thing all put together of where have we been, what have we done, and where are we going? Okay.
I'd look forward to that. Thank you.
And just kind of along with that, you said this is grant funded. And as we've recently seen, sometimes grants can get a little squirrely on us. If we had to fund this ourselves, what's the cost to maintaining this program? And if we don't know it now, I think in a month from now when we come back, I'd like to know that information as well.
Sure, sure. I can get that information for you.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions, concerns? Any from the audience? Okay, Ann, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Okay, agenda item number 11. Discussions on students being taught by substitute teachers for consecutive school years. For discussion only. Richard?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. This is an item that was requested that we discuss. And I just wanted to give you a few thoughts as I introduce this. Traditionally, substitute teachers, of course, are licensed individuals in the state of Nevada, and they're typically called in when the regular teacher is unable to be in attendance. So that's kind of the system that we're all used to. Of course, currently, as it's becoming more difficult to find fully licensed teachers, as we experience a decline in the number of people who are going into education, we have now substitute teachers who are hired to actually take the place of, or at least to fill in for, fully licensed teachers. Now, in some cases, the teachers that fill these bills are fully licensed. They may be retired teachers. They may be teachers who have entered into the field as, or at least through the alternative route to licensure. These are individuals that may or may not have bachelor's degrees, and so I just want to kind of let you know that we're looking at anybody and everybody for potential substitute teachers to come in and to help us at our sites. And when we do have folks who are working in a long-term position, we've got staff who assist those individuals, so it's not like they're just put into these positions without any support. We recognize those teachers as individuals that are serving our students, and so being able to provide them with the background and the information that our regular teachers get is just as important. So with that, I wanted to certainly have a conversation tonight. The goal was whether or not we should take the concept of students who may be in classrooms in consecutive years with substitute teachers. Do we want to somehow form policy and regulation around that condition?
We'll let you begin the discussion, and then from there, we'll all jump in.
So, this is an issue that I've talked about since I've been on the board, and it's also something that I've talked with several teachers about, concerns at their sites. And so, and specifically one site that has had a number of teachers and substitute teachers in the place of licensed teachers. And so there's kind of the stories I get from these people is there's 4 years of having a substitute teacher as opposed to a licensed teacher. And so in my mind, I think that what we need to make sure, and I don't know that even a policy and regulation that forbids it is what I'm looking for, but I think there needs to be a discussion because, like I said, when I brought this up the last time, I'm pretty positive that everybody in this classroom, if we had children in these elementary schools, we'd be working towards getting those kids into the classrooms with licensed teachers. And we certainly wouldn't allow consecutive years with unprepared teachers. And so that's kind of my concern, and I think we just need to look at how we're doing that because I think we're setting up some of these kids for failure, and I'm concerned about that. And I know I understand trust me, I understand the reality of teacher shortages. I mean, the fact is, the bodies aren't out there. But in our current situation, we need to figure out a way to protect our students, because I think the kids that are being put in this track are the kids with the single mom who's working 2 jobs, or being raised by the grandmother, or parents who don't speak English. And so I think that we need to make sure that somebody's looking out for these kids, and that's my concern.
And if I could maybe just respond there, I know that as I've talked with principals, the process that's used at the end of the year, the grade level teachers will come together as they place students into classrooms in the coming year, or at least for the coming year. And principals have said to me, we as a group will talk about those students that have been in a classroom that maybe has been taught by a long-term sub, and so they are aware of those situations and those conditions, and I know they then try to put those students so that that's not the case, so that they're not in multiple classrooms where there may not be a fully endorsed teacher. Even so, there might be conditions of health and families' concerns where a teacher may find themselves in a situation where they have to use long-term care themselves. And so even though all the planning on the front end might be one thing, who's to say whether or not a teacher that was thought to be a teacher that would be there for the entire year may not be able to. And so there's then this concern or consideration of always moving students, and maybe even moving students that you didn't intend to move, in trying to keep, I don't know, the students in a place where you think they might have a better experience.
And I would consider that's a different circumstance, because that's not something in our control. You know what I mean? Hopefully we want all of our employees to stay healthy all year and have healthy families, but those things are out of our control. And I don't think I'm asking for a school to have to restructure when a teacher gets sick or has a baby or that kind of thing. I think that, but to have a purposeful process as we're going into the next year, I think that is reasonable. And I think the other thing that, I kind of, when you get elected, and I met with you guys, and I said one of the things I'd love to see is data for these kids who have had long-term subs in the place of teachers for consecutive years, and I'd like to see their achievement data and see where they're stacking up compared to their peers. And I think that that's something that if we look at the matrix, I think that might be something to really examine how it's also impacting their achievement.
Okay, I picked up here, and Mike, you said maybe not a regulation or a policy. And Richard, what you described, and we've got principals sitting out here, if you actually sit down and you evaluate going to the next year of where a student should be placed based upon their either achievement or, I don't know, whatever. And if that's being done now, how do we get into a situation like you just described of having substitutes for 2, 3, 4 years in a row? How does that happen? Is this something new, that the end of the year evaluation and placement of students in the next year, has it always been part of this? And Mike, what you're discussing, is it just one school, or is it across the district?
The majority of these concerns have been raised from one school, yes. It was one of those, I think Trustee Green and I had a meeting with a number of teachers that was one of the primary concerns they had. probably 2 years ago. But I think that looking at the situation, and I don't think there's anybody out here that I'd say doesn't care, or, you know what I mean? I think that in our situation and with the teacher shortage and the difficulty in finding qualified staff, there are unavoidable circumstances. I understand that. But when there is an alternative, I think that's what needs to be in place. And I know that that's just what any parent would want for their child. Any teacher wants their child to be set up for success. You work really hard with these kids for 180 days. And the thing you hate to see is the next year when they all start to go the other way. And so I know that people care about what's happening, but what I think we need to do as the governing body is look at what policies and procedures are in place to influence the best choices or placements being made for students. And so I agree with the teachers that have come to me about this. I think that, and I've voiced this several times. I think that I know that it's unavoidable, but we have to find a way to make the best of an unfortunate situation, really.
What's the least amount of grade levels, like classrooms in a grade level at a school that we have? Is it like 3 per grade, or seems to me that?
You mean like classroom sections?
Yeah, like say third
4
grade.
classes of 4th graders?
Because what I'm getting at is like, would a policy be really that crippling, or do we have grade levels where there's multiple long-term substitute teachers?
So in my literal mind, when I think of trying to create a policy, we have policies, for example, that require us to treat all students who come to us in a fair and equitable manner. We can't discriminate in how we provide educational services. In my literal mind, I worry about having something that is so structured that then you can't be flexible within those 4 classrooms. That if it says, if one student was in a classroom in the previous year where that student was taught by a substitute teacher, or maybe not a fully licensed teacher, then let's say you put that student in a teacher's classroom the following year, and then we have, one of those unforeseen illnesses. And now we've got that student who may be, even regardless of all of our good planning, now they're still in this second consecutive year where we've got them being taught by a substitute teacher. And so if a policy says that that's not able to happen, and now we're always looking to move students, then are we going to be replacing that student in a classroom where a student has already gotten used to the classmates, the class routine? Is it going to impact a student unintentionally that we didn't have to move or didn't need to move? And so I just worry that having something that then forces the principal to make a decision in that way maybe takes away some of the other flexibility that we have. That would be my concern.
I guess the other observation, since we've already discussed it, we're really talking about one site. Always making a policy for one instance is never a good idea. So I'm just going to put it out there then. Maybe we need to look case by case at some of this and have some real conversations if in fact these meetings at the end of the school year are actually happening.
I would invite any of our principals to come up to verify those processes of putting students, so when you're in the 3rd grade and moving up to the 4th grade, trying to consider what the strengths or maybe gaps that might be in any student's academic past, and what do they need in the future as they move up to the fourth grade, for example. And I'm pretty confident that those discussions, Mr. Walker, you were out there as a teacher, is that am I saying that correctly in terms of how the next class of students are created?
Yes, I mean, and I kind of have a thought on if, I think that there's a little bit of flexibility in if an employee is sick or whatever. I mean, just like we aren't going to restructure every single classroom. I don't think anybody's asking for that. But I do think that possibly one of the solutions is also each site should have to report to the board how many teachers were taught by an unlicensed teacher. How many of those students spent multiple years being taught by an unlicensed teacher? And then also, what is the achievement data of those students? And do it publicly at a board meeting, because these parents need to know. We have to send letters home to these families saying, your kid's being taught by a teacher that isn't highly qualified or whatever at Title I schools. But I mean, that's one of the ways to monitor the frequency of how this is happening in place of a policy.
So Richard, do we, just so I'm clear, do we have this data? Do we know? Right, I'm assuming we do. And to Mike's point, I mean, that's really what I'd want to know is, for a parent or a school board member or anybody in the public, is this really an issue? I mean, I know it is in some cases, but, I would like to know whether it's consecutive or otherwise in a student's career, how many years in their academic career were they taught by a highly qualified licensed teacher versus a substitute. And I think, Mike brought it up for me, but, and how is their achievement? Maybe we find out, hey, doesn't matter. They're getting the same education and they're scoring really well. Maybe they're not, and it's a big issue. But I haven't seen any of that data, so I don't know. But I think that's important dialogue to have and important statistics to look at.
Well, and I think that information, if we do have data like that, if we could compile it, would be helpful to bring to the legislature during session this year to, when we're discussing teacher shortages and we're discussing alternate routes to licensure, that would be, if you had a report like that, that would be good information.
Okay, before we hear from the two principals, let me ask Dr. Delphin, what role do you play in this? You're in HR. We have substitutes. We have, what do you play a role in this? Going forward?
Absolutely. I just wanted to add that we don't just discuss staffing at the end of the year. We discuss it almost every month with regard to any subs or any shortages, or if there's a maternity leave or some long-term leave. We are constantly scrambling in our department to make sure we fill any of those long-term vacancies, and I'm thinking more than 2 weeks is my definition, at a time that we try to get the most highly qualified, and let me just underline this, effective teacher in that classroom. And so I'm constantly on the phone or emailing or meeting with principals monthly on those issues that happen with life and death. So with that said, I don't wait till the end of the year to have those conversations. We have them all year now.
Okay, in the one instance described at one site, there appears to have been some problems. You were involved in that and aware of the situation?
I'm not aware of 3 or 4 years in a row, to be honest. That's new to me. But I know of maybe 1 year at a time, and then we try to close that gap, if you will. If we can avoid it, we typically have those conversations very early. Recruitment season, it's not a season anymore, it's all year. I'm getting college recruitment fairs actually next month already, which I've never seen in my career in 10 years in HR. So they usually come out in the spring. Now they're starting in October. So I think nationally the colleges understand that if we go early enough and try to capture whatever dwindling population of teachers are out there, the better it's going to be for their careers. In the big picture, I believe what Trustee Crossman is saying is correct, but I can tell you that I can't compete with Texas that starts at $50,000 a year. And
Cost of living in Texas is ridiculously low. Oh, my.
right. I mean, it's great that we got the $40,000 minimum, but if you look at our millennials who are coming out of college, they don't mind job hopping. They really don't. They'll take the best offer. So I'm thinking short and long term. If I had my druthers and started the TEACH program EDU 110 at UNR 10 years ago, we might not have as many vacancies in the classroom. But I can tell you we're never not working towards filling every position, whether it's bus driver or teacher, to make sure we have the best effective teacher or person for that position.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand the situation and who's involved. Now, let me ask Mrs. Kima, are you involved in this also? Are you made aware when there's a substitute, maybe year after year, and the same kid is going in and being taught by a substitute?
I'm not necessarily aware if there's a student that has a substitute more than 1 year in a row. When there is, like when school starts in a week here, we'll be looking at class sizes. We'll be, in some cases, there may be a need for an additional teacher. There may be a substitute in that new slot for a period of time till we can hire somebody permanently. So I'm aware of the substitutes at that time. I'm aware of substitutes when principals configure their classes around due to class size. We talk about specialized training. We invited the new hires to the long-term subs to our new hire training this week, and they went through every single bit of training that our permanent staff that we hired went through, just in order to provide them support. So in those cases, Carrie Pryor and I are aware of, and talking to the principals, what subs they have in their building, what experience they have, making sure that they have the curriculum assessment and instructional support that they need from the coaches that we have assigned in the buildings. As far as tracking students from year to year to see if they've had a sub more than 1 year or not, I don't have that data at my fingertips. I don't know where if that's been kept. But what we can do is in the spring, just have a conscious reminder, have a discussion with the principals. When you've got your blue cards out, your pink cards out, you're looking at high, medium, low, you're looking at test scores, you're looking at special needs, you're looking at special services, making sure what do they have as a teacher before, and what do they need next? And maybe being very conscious about trying to put them in a classroom where there isn't an empty space while we're still looking for a teacher, if we can.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ruth Lee Clary, the principal at Mark Twain Elementary School, and I would like to explain to you kind of how we get to that point and what we do with our students. So at the end of every year at our staff site, and I know it's not much different at every other site, there may be a slight variation, but most of us pretty much approach it this manner. Students are written down on a pink and blue card, making it easy for us to distribute to the next grade level. On there are their MAP scores, if they've met their growth, if they have issues, if they've had a sub, if they have a permanent teacher. All that information is put on a pink and blue card for them. We go through and we distribute those students, noticing if there's someone that's had, because I've had a moment before where it's not necessarily a long-term sub, but a teacher that may not have been as effective as I wanted. That's those students that were coming from that teacher's class, we made sure that we placed them appropriately in another teacher's class that is long-standing, shown history history of making progress with our students or his students and place them appropriately in those classes. The classes are then balanced out, so no one has a preponderance of one type of student over another. And so that really helps with that. In regard to long-term subs, I can speak for my site specifically. I have two that'll be with us next year, potentially. One is the kindergarten and one is the first. My kindergarten, we select those long-term subs very carefully. It's not just that we put it in the pool and see what happens. Those ones are some that come with experience or they come with training. Both of mine are on their last year of education and getting ready to do their student teaching. They've had all the classes. They're just at that last little point. So they're 6 months away from being hireable. So for me and most of the principals, we look at those very carefully because we too are concerned about where we put our students. So we look at their MAP data, we make sure they're making appropriate growth. If they're not making that appropriate growth, then we make sure we make interventions or adjustment to what they're getting. Hope that kind of helps a little bit.
Jennifer Ward for DeJoseph for the record. I agree with Ruth Lee. We don't do our blue and pink cards anymore. We do it digitally. And so our class placement, we can put in there that they already had a substitute. So when we go to do class placement, they are put in, we can tag them to certain classroom teachers. That's the same thing if we have students who are Mr. Green had mentioned small groups. I have a group of 57 second graders, so I only have 3 teachers. 2 are certified with their TESOL, 1 is certified with GATE. So how we position those students is pretty tight. It's I've got 60 kids and I only have so many seats. And so to position them, carefully is my job as an administrator to double check any of the class placements. I know Mr. Walker, you had mentioned some data. So when I came into Fremont, that was a situation where Fremont had quite a few long-term subs in a grade level. So I did an analysis of every grade level, which was very difficult for my staff, and some of you heard about that because I brought it up to our staff meeting, was that some of our substitutes did very well in comparison to some of our other teachers, and that's a rough data point.
I don't doubt that. I mean, but this is a difficult conversation we have to have.
For sure.
And so, what you're both saying, you take note of if they have a long-term sub in the place of a teacher, is just adding strength to this point.
Yes.
That it is an important factor, and it is something that has to be looked at and addressed. And there's talk about data, and I know you have great data, but I think the district could recreate this data.
Oh, for sure.
We know exactly what classrooms didn't have a teacher. We know exactly what students were in there the last couple years. So we could easily, especially using the data matrix that we have in this district, there's little buttons with those filters. It'd be very easy to dial that down. And so I think that it is worth investigating and looking at. For the sake of our students, really.
For sure. And I would just caution the idea of a policy or procedure, because I think when we give an inch, we take a mile. So if we had it where at the beginning of the year, you wouldn't have it. I had a teacher who went out yesterday unexpectedly for a maternity leave. Now, granted, she was supposed to go out, but she went out earlier. But last year, and that wasn't a shock. I take that back. But last year we had some long-term subs before I arrived, and those students were carefully placed. They were put in with some dynamic people, and one of those got very ill. And some of those students had repeated years of long-term subs. That happened in November, and had I, where the policy starts getting a little tricky of then I would have disrupted the lives of 100 students. Because if you take 2 or 3 kids out of any, and that would be, our kids, where it said, well, he's already had a long-term sub, so it's your turn.
Right, and I want to be clear, that's not what I'm advocating.
Right.
So emergencies happen, things come up, and I'm not saying we're going to tip the cart over and shuffle everybody up because, so-and-so got sick. I mean, I'm not saying we need a policy. I'm not asking to tie people's hands. What I'm asking is to look out for the best interest of students. And that's, you know what I mean?
That's
I'm not
my
trying
job.
to make anybody's job harder, but in some places that's not happening. And that's why we're
Right.
elected. And when people come to us about this stuff, it's our job to bring it up. And it's kind of one of those conversations that nobody wants to talk about. But, it's out there. It's something I'm hearing about several times. So, I mean, it's happening, so.
Oh, and I appreciate that. I think the hard part is when, I think Member Green said it, when you make rules for one, it's kind of like, if you had a lot of kids and you make one rule because one kid can't follow the directions. And we don't do that in classrooms. We encourage teachers not to do that because we want individuals to be able to take care of their business. And I know that from my site, I would say that my students are placed from day one with very careful consideration. Everything from personality of the student to, personality of the parent, personality of the teacher, everything that we can put into play to do our student placement, regardless of who their parents are or how they are in our school, we take care of making sure that as many of those students get the best possible. And for those who are placed in any classroom that's not as effective as that, I would like to. That's my job, to make sure my presence is known, to make sure that my coaches are supporting, to make sure that the grade level PLC is as supportive as possible, and that's my responsibility. And so if somebody's complaining, I would like the board members to come and talk to me, because I would like to remediate anything a decision that I've made. If it questions, if it harms a kid, that's obviously something that I would not be able to tolerate from myself either.
And so then you'd feel comfortable reporting out on how many of your students have been taught by long-term subs and how many of those students had a repeat year of having a sub and their data, just based on what you're saying?
For me, that's just facts.
Right.
That is what it is. I think the hard part, though, and I think just to be cautioned, last year I had what would be considered a long-term sub because they don't have an elementary license. She had a license in biology, 3 other science degrees, but she did not have an elementary license. And so I think sometimes when we say the long-term sub that I currently will be starting my school year has had a Nevada state license, has had a Nevada or an Alaska teaching license, but is not currently a licensed certified teacher, but is a certified sub. Has she gone through all of the programming? Yes. She just doesn't have the current licensure that allows her to have a full-time classroom as a certified employee. As a full-time teacher. And so I think that's the other thing that we have to factor in is, what does long-term sub mean? Does that mean you have the 6 credits that gets you a sub license, or does that mean that you're as close as possible to becoming a full-time certified teacher? Or does that mean that you're retired and you're choosing not to do all of the recertification credits that's required to keep your Nevada licensure? Or are you out of state and you're just not going to jump through the hoops of Nevada? So I think that that's another data point when we talk about data, is what is the definition of a long-term sub? I think that's a very slippery kind of wiggly thing, because I don't think, just like you say, it's a student, they have just as many attributes as a long-term sub. And I think that that's part of the nature of this job. So it's any one data point you can assign meaning to, but I think it's to be very cautious about making sure that we have a good definition for every individual situation, because I think it would be very individualistic.
And I think that's a good point, Jennifer. But also, I think we can talk ourselves one side or another on this whole topic. And the reality is, if none of that stuff really matters and people are just good at what they do, maybe nobody should be licensed. You know, I mean, if they're good, they're good.
Yeah.
Let's all not go through Nevada's hoops. You know, and I think we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and no, I know, and I'm being somewhat, you know, sarcastic about that, but I think in the end, I think I just like to, like, going back to my original question, I just like to see some of the data and, you know, maybe we don't have a problem. Maybe it's all just fine, but, you know, I'd like to know so that when people come to me and they say, you know, hey, my neighbor's had a long-term sub for 3 years and the poor kid can't do this. We can substantiate that and say, all right, you know, is that an issue or isn't it an issue? Because, you know, I agree, you could have somebody that taught biology at different levels, has master's and PhD, but, you know, maybe teaching elementary school isn't really their thing and they're not effective. You know, so it's, so, you know, I just don't know what the answer is. You know, I just think having some data that we as the board can look at would be helpful for me. Ruth Lee?
The only data point that would be really difficult with that is I can tell you for students that have been at my site for the entire time and what they've had. But if they have gone from school to school, I may not know that. And that's where it's going to be difficult. Most of my students have been there, and I can tell you I've had one long-term sub previously before this, and 90% of her kindergarten students scored above the 90th percentile in math and maps, both reading and math. So that was pretty phenomenal, and I'm thrilled to pieces that she's staying, we signed her on as a teacher. But if those students have traveled from school to school, and some of ours have, it would be very difficult to be able to backtrack to find out whether they had a sub or not.
And I think transiency is another issue. I mean, and I think this is just a little bit different. And you know what I mean? I don't think we're asking you to go retrace everybody's steps. I think we're looking at the site, at your site, your current students. You know what I mean? So your new students wouldn't be part of that data because of the fact that you don't have that data unless they're bouncing in and out nonstop type deal, which does happen sometimes.
And transient within the district is one thing. Transiency from, obviously, if a kid came from another district, not much we can do about that. But I mean, if a kid started off at Sealager and I was one of these kids, I'm not here, but, you know, in fourth grade, I went to 3 different schools. Not in the same district, so good luck tracking down how I did. I don't even know how I did. But if a kid goes from Mark Twain to Sealager to Empire, we have that information in the district. You know, so we would know who they got taught by. You know, so that's the kind of information I'd want. I wouldn't want to go beyond our district.
We would. It's just not easily, that part's not easily accessible as it used to be. When you go to look up a student's history in Infinite Campus, it doesn't necessarily list the teacher when what we can see. I can tell you that I've gotten a student from Fremont that they were registered there last year, but looking at what I have access to, I can't see who their teacher was.
Right. And I don't think I'm asking you to track that down. To me, that seems more like, in that case, it's a district thing. Maybe a Dr. Medina or somebody can, you know, fill in those kinds of gaps.
Right. It used to be, honestly, with Power School, you used to know exactly what teacher they had, and it was really very nice. But we don't have that option anymore.
The one thing I would like is to consider is what would be considered long-term. So 12 weeks with maternity, that is that's a good chunk of the school year. That's a third of the school year. Is it when somebody goes out for illness? I think that we'd have to put in that as a data point in there of how many months that person or those students received a long-term substitute education as a data point, just to inform the board that, if it's a maternity leave versus my current situation, I have a 5th grade because we're unable to fill it at this point. I had a student teacher who was supposed to finish and be all lined up for Thanksgiving, and they backed out on Saturday. So, I'm back to the drawing board. And so when he goes to the recruitment fairs in October.
So Jennifer, and I think that maternity leaves and those types of things are different because there's a teacher working with that sub. And so they've either met and they lined out their curriculum and, most of the teachers I've worked at, they have lesson plans kind of throughout that time, but then.
So the requirement is basically a week. So that's why the long-term subs get paid a little extra, is that all the planning lies on them. So,
But what I'm saying is they've been consulting with that person. I guess if you want to add that in there, I'm primarily talking about when we don't have a teacher.
right.
So
And I think it would be.
we can make it as complicated as you want.
I think it would be an excellent data point just to say, how many did we actually have from start to finish of the school year? Because in that case, I was 0, But when I look at the impact on my kids, the long-term sub impact was impactful on my students because that started in November and that class had 5 substitutes before I managed to get a person to stay for an extended period of time. So that long-term sub position, that is more impactful than, and I didn't have anyone full, from beginning of the school year for 180 days. So.
And Jennifer, I truly don't know. Not being an educator myself, I don't know what the definition of long-term is. I would say it's longer than 2 weeks, but less than 12 weeks. I would think if my kid was in a classroom and for 6 weeks they had a sub, I'd start getting concerned, is that too long? So, if I had to pick a number, that'd be my number, but it's not worth a whole lot. I'd be looking to you going, what's your definition of long-term?
However long the teacher is out.
So a couple of years ago, I did have that very similar situation that Jen had, as far as we started off the school year with a certified teacher. She declined. She decided to leave in October. We had found a long-term sub that was a qualified teacher. She left in February. Finally we had a couple series of short-time subs, and then finally we found someone that would take it long-term for the remainder of the school year. Those students the next year were placed strategically in the strongest person's class and relegated out. And I know that Jen has done the same thing with hers. So it's not something that we don't look at. We look at their MAP data. We look at to make sure that they're making the achievement that they need to. The coaches are in there with them, supporting them as they're teaching or instructing the students. So it's not something that we just kind of put that sub in there and say, okay, go to it and kind of do the best you can. It's something that we watch very closely, continuously throughout that time. Because as concerned as you are, we're as also equally concerned.
And really another question I have that I've also voiced a couple times is, in those situations, this is a fairly small school district. And we have a lot of instructional coaches that could share the duty, and we could do some reallocating of personnel in those situations. Because if I have 6, 8, 10 elementary school teachers who are our best of our best, otherwise they wouldn't be our coaches, sitting at Gleason kind of mapping out curriculum, and then I have, Jennifer's classroom with 5 different substitute teachers, they can't get a permanent person to save their life. It doesn't make sense to me that we're not taking one of our brightest educators and saying, we need you to fill in. And I know people are going to say, well, there's grant funds. Well, then you don't charge it to the grant. You take it out of the general fund because we're planning to pay for that teacher anyway. And so I think that that's a deeper discussion that we need to really look at about. I know we have this focus on aligning our curriculum, and I support that. But in a small school district, you could do that with a couple coaches. I'm just saying that you don't need a room full of people to do that work. And when you're looking at what's good for kids, and we say at every meeting in this district, we're doing what's good for kids. That's our concern. And we say that about everything. But then when it comes to finding teachers and we can't find somebody, we're letting our brightest educators sit off campus, make curriculum, or sit in on PLC meetings when you could say, okay, you 3 are going to kind of do the science work for us right now because we need these 2 teachers to fill in a classroom. And I think that that's just something we have to start looking at in this environment.
Okay, at this point, we got to bring this, where we're going with this. is it a consensus that we probably don't need a regulation or a policy? We can get that off the table. But we do need, go ahead, Ryan.
You're probably leading to it. I think what we need is data before we can make any blanket statement like that.
Okay, and we have testimony from our two principals that could provide us with some data. But Richard and Sue, maybe, and Jose, with our elementary schools, can we see by the first meeting in October to get some data as to the number of our students that have gone more than a year? Is it 2 years? Or what would be a cutoff that we could get some data? Students who have gone 2 consecutive years with a substitute teacher. We should be able to get that. And just starting with that, bring that information back to the board, and then we can take a look. And just, do we want to go, like you said, academic achievement? I mean, we could go keep tearing down, but...
And I'd say 2 or more, because, I mean, if there are kids out there that have gone 4 years, I mean, we want to know that data.
Okay. Okay, then I'll ask Sue and I'll ask Richard and Jose, and our principals. That appears, based on what you said, the data is available. You have that data.
I know you're trying to start real simple, but that seems, from the discussion we had, like what Ms. Ward DeJoseph said, if it was her instance last year, that nobody fit into that because a qualified teacher was there for some portion of the year but missed quite a bit of time. So you can't really do it that simple. I think we do have to hone in on what we either, it can't be that many instances though. I think we could easily look at some data and figure out what qualifies as long-term sub, or how many days of 180 days with a student sitting in a classroom without a qualified teacher there, do we, not unacceptable is the wrong word, but you know, do we deem that we want looked at for data purposes? And so, because otherwise the way you phrase it is just the 180. And what we just talked about, that's not going to be sufficient. So we come back in October, we'd have the same discussion and want more data. So I think we can hone in a little bit better.
Let me ask Richard, Jennifer, and Rufy, just given what you've heard, can you get together with Richard and Sue and start this by providing what you believe is some data, which will come into the definition of a long-term sub and all that comes into play. But we'll get those kids that have gone 2 or more years with a substitute teacher and with some definitive timelines, though.
Just a concern, a couple concerns I have. I'm concerned about the extra workload that this may place on our principals or our teachers. So I'm not sure if having the individual sites compile that data, or if it's something that someone at the district office could do. And then I also have a concern, Mike, with the discussion of instructional coaches. It occurs to me that there could be contract issues where they've already contracted for the year, and that would saying, oh, now we have a long-term sub situation, we need to move you. I feel like that would create issues there that maybe I'm concerned about.
In Carson City, I mean, unless things have changed, I think we always signed our contracts on the last day of the school year. So I think that's kind of different. I don't think that we did that. But a teacher on special assignment is on the same contract as a classroom teacher. And so what I'm saying is all hands on deck. If it was our kids, anybody up here, we would want that,
Let's just get this basic data to see how big the problem is, or if we have a problem, and then we'll go from there. So that's okay. Richard, you have a
Well, and just listening to what Trustee Walker says, I mean, if the issue is less about substitutes and more about using our people differently, I mean, that's kind of what I'm taking from your remarks.
I think it's both, honestly. I'm concerned about both, honestly.
And I'm concerned about the conversation that this is all pointed at one site, and if we don't have that large of an issue at the other sites, then we need to take another look.
I can tell you my data right now. I have 0. I've had 0 students that have had a long-term sub for 2 years.
I also would be 0 if we did the 2 full years.
If it's just one site that has an issue, then we need to deal with the one site.
And so just for clarity's sake, we're looking for 2 years of students who may have had a long-term sub, we'll have to identify what that is, and their academic record is
2 or more in the last 5 years. So 2 or more years of having a long-term sub within the last 5 years.
Were you two specifically invited to be here for this, or you saw it on the agenda? Was all the principals asked to come down? Because I don't want you two to think that you were being singled out here.
I volunteered.
Okay.
I saw it on the agenda.
That didn't happen and was never discussed, so you guys know.
I'll just add that I let them know that this was going to be on the agenda, and I sought their support because where they're working in it every day, I don't always have the same perspective as they do. So who came tonight was of their own volition, though. So thank you, ladies.
Yeah, right.
Okay, any?
I know that's not the issue.
We have a lot to do.
Yeah.
Any further discussion?
Just a thank you, though, to the principals, because I know that student placement
It's difficult.
there's so many different things going on, and it's not just long-term subs, it's you need TESOL endorsements, you need gate programming, you need all of these different things, and you need this one who always fights with this one to not be in the same classroom. And so thank you for all of the work that you're doing, because I think most of the time it's done very, very well.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 12, approval of consent agenda.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Any questions or concerns from the audience? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Agenda item 13, informational items. Any concerns, comments, questions? You know, although not on the informational item, AJ, when will you have the first count?
Sorry. So with the first day of school, we start getting notification of a count each day, but it's not really considered real, and Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's day 11, basically, after the first 2 weeks, because certain kids will then be dropped if they haven't shown up and that sort of thing. So at that point, I think usually Mr. Stokes sends out some update, maybe early, and then really at that point. So then for myself, as far as starting to put it into the model thing I was talking about, that the date I've used has been October 1st, so they want you to always use kind of that same date in history. So that's when I'll kind of pull, but we'll have a good idea really after the first 2 weeks of school what things I think look like and what we need to be prepared for.
So we might have some preliminary information at the next board meeting.
one of the benchmarks too is always after Labor Day. That's a time when people sort of figure out that it's time for school to start again, and so off they go.
Okay, request for future agenda topics, and just the one I suggested with the update with the suicide policy, and to hear from social workers at the elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools, so we get that complete perspective of the social emotional health going on across the board, and then we'll combine with the state initiative for the Safe School app or phone number. So, any other? Okay. Okay. And without objection.
Good luck to everybody tomorrow, starting the year.
Okay. We are adjourned.